Hey, Nula Falcha, welcome to Psychics and Psychos. This is Irish Granny Helen, and I'm covering the details of what led up to the crime because Denise is just pulled in a million directions, and I have all the time in the world. So I volunteered to do this, which frees us up to get together to do the psychic part of it. So we have so far looked at the victims and the crime itself and the end of the semester after the crime. And that's on part 1, which you'll find on my channel. And this is part 2, where we're going to talk about Kohberger's childhood and his experience at Pullman and Washington State University at Pullman in his PhD class. And if we have time, we'll start getting into the psychology of it. Probably be a third video on his psychology because it's unbelievable. And there are a couple of different psychologists on the internet who have done extensive deep dives into his background, and they don't have all the same information, so it's really interesting. Stick around. So his childhood, he was born November 21st, 1994, so it's almost happy birthday. His father's name is Michael. He was a school janitor. He never went to college, and he was very proud of Brian for his advanced education. His mother, Marianne, called him complicated. He was a troubled child, and more about her later, lots more. She was a paraprofessional at school, helped with children who had special needs. His family background is really interesting, and I think we need to file this away for future reference. His grandfather was charged with car theft. His great uncle, which would be the grandfather's brother, was in trouble for gambling and larceny. Kind of a lot of criminality in his family background. In high school, he was extremely overweight and very bullied because of it, and he claimed especially by the girls. He was reported to have had a very turbulent adolescence. He was down to earth but bullied. He was a mediocre student. He had no social skills. We're going to get into this more. This is jumping around just a little bit because of my different sources, and it just became really problematic to try to collate all of it. So we'll do a little review. It won't hurt any of us. Around the age of 15, he was complaining about having visual snow, which is actually a thing. It's like a fuzzy TV screen. It's a chronic neurological condition which wrecks your visual perception. He called it mind fizzle. As a teenager, he was alternately combative and detached. Online, he expressed more. He expressed sadness. He had no emotion and no remorse, but he had no self-esteem either. He referred to himself as evil and the devil. And this is as a teenager. I think we call that a red flag. Between the ages of 12 and 22, he had a lot of problems. He began using heroin to self-medicate for his depression and anxiety. At the age of 17, now there's a whole encounter with his father that I have written down here somewhere, which we will return to. But this is more of a general look at his background at first. At the age of 17, he lost 100 pounds, and he became really obnoxious about it. He became a vegan, and he would only use separate cooking dishes. If meat was cooked in a pan or eaten on a plate, he would not use them. He had skin removal surgery, and he became very, very arrogant and acting, as his high school acquaintances said, high and mighty, like the smartest guy in the room. He acted very superior. He also was socially awkward. He would approach strange girls in the hallway in high school. They didn't know him, and he would go up and go, "Let's hang out," and he was just creepy, and it was very awkward. He didn't understand how to develop social interactions, and a question has been asked, was he on the autism spectrum? But these rejections led to shame and anger and rage. And there's that genetic component of his grandfather and great uncles being criminals. But then there's this social, I guess you could call it trauma. And so nature versus nurture, is this sociopathy or what's going on here? The family history of criminology might suggest psychopathology. Now, I just to let everybody know, I'm an amateur psychiatrist here. I have no idea. I just know what I read, and I think it's important to remember that we're not diagnosing here on this podcast. We're speculating based on what we've read, and it's like trying to solve a bit of a mystery and try to understand what makes people tick. So these are the things that we've read. I'm speaking of the royal we. Denise and I have read, and we're not pretending that we know how to diagnose somebody. We wouldn't assume to do that or presume to do that, but this is all just speculation, allegedly. He did have a lot of these things are documented online, so it's not speculation. He had revenge fantasies. He wanted to get back at the women who rejected him. The ones who were his bullies, and they had often been girls in the early years. The extended family criminality hints at some kind of genetic temperament and behavioral issues. With the genetics and the social rejection and the rage, it set the stage for further mental health issues. This is according to psychiatrists on the internet who have gone over his case. His family put him in rehab, and there's a whole situation about that. He got arrested for car theft at the age of 19, and his father turned him in, and he went to rehab. And when his father turned him in, he threatened his father. He said, "Don't do anything stupid." After that got kind of cleared up, he went to junior college. He got a job as a school security cop. As so many psychopaths do, they long to be in law enforcement. He'd been mediocre in high school and an unlikely PhD candidate. But in junior college, he discovered that education, over intellectualizing, became a defense mechanism. He felt it made him feel intellectually superior. It gave him something to lord over other people. So he went from high school to junior college, and he got better and better at schoolwork. And he got accepted to the master's program in criminal justice at Sales University, where his professor of forensic psychology was Dr. Catherine Ramsland. I always say it wrong, Ramsland, the expert on forensic psychology. She has written 65 books. She's written the definitive book on Dennis Rader. She actually had lengthy conversations with him. The BTK killer, by the way. I just assume everybody knows what I'm talking about. Dr. Ramsland has a PhD in philosophy. For his master's, Brian did a survey. This is very interesting. He went online and he invited criminals to respond to questions that he put out, a survey of questions about their thoughts and feelings around their crimes. And if you look at it in retrospect, given what he did later, it almost reads like a how-to. Like, what should I look for? What should I avoid? How should I do things to get away with it? And the psychiatrists who've talked about him say that fantasy builds an appetite to experience the real thing. So he wanted to be Ransom Star's student, and he became a master of small talk. His area of specialty was the criminal mind. He was obnoxious to be around in class. He dominated debate in the classroom, arrogant, putting people down. One professor said he was the most brilliant student I ever met. He wanted everybody to know about it. The question that this particular analyst asks, which I think is really interesting, is did murder become an intellectual exercise for him? And then this doctor of psychology, or doctor of psychiatry, talks a bit about Brian Kohberger being like Raskolnikov in Dostoevsky's book Crime and Punishment. He talks about the great man narcissist. So in the book, Raskolnikov talks about murder as an intellectual exercise. And it's very dehumanizing, and he over-intellectualizes it, just like Kohberger. And he's a narcissist, and the way he's characterizing in the book, Crime and Punishment, the way he's referring to the murder and murderers, it's very much a defense mechanism, and Kohberger mirrors that quite a lot in his own life. Terrorists do this doctor says. Terrorists do this. They turn bloody murder into an ideology. Over-intellectualize. You always have to be the smartest guy in the room. He argued endlessly, it's described in class, with fellow students, with the professor. He argued until he won, whatever that means. His academic success served to reinforce his sense of superiority and his behavior. So he got into the PhD program at Washington State University in Pullman, which was 8 miles from the scene of the crime, Moscow, University of Idaho. And this, of course, validated his grandiosity. He is smarter than anybody else. That's a hard thing to get into. Meanwhile, women found him to be weird and a creep. For example, in 2015, he went on a date. He insisted on walking her home. And as so many of us were, she was young and she didn't like conflict. So she said, okay, you can walk me home. And at her house, he she couldn't get rid of him. He came upstairs. He began to tickle her like she was a child. It's the only way he knew how to relate to her. And it got more and more persistent, and she started to get scared. So she locked herself in the bathroom and pretended to throw up until he left. And then he texted her and told her she had really good birthing hips. Ew. Before classes started at Pullman, he applied to the police department at Pullman for an internship. And when he got to Pullman, his dad came with him and helped him to move in. And his dad took the neighbor in the apartment building aside and said, my son is shy, look after him. He was 28 years old. So there are not a lot of stories about him, but here's one. Before the semester started for his PhD, he was invited to a party in Moscow, which is not that far away. The University of Idaho is called the best party school in the state. Moscow had a growing crime and drug problem, but it was a very religious area and a very conservative area once you got off the campus. Part of the population wanted a theocracy. If you remember from our last video about this case, the chief of police of the city was having a lot of problems with this evangelical church pastor in town who was oppositional to things the police department were trying to do. Lots of political talk going on, and they wanted to be, this cracked me up, I talk about this all the time, they wanted to be the capital of the Great American Redoubt and in charge of the upcoming Civil War. It's a real movement in Idaho. And the Great American Redoubt, we're not here to talk about politics, but you need to understand the environment. This is a redoubt is a fort. The Great American Redoubt is this concept of Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, and parts of eastern Washington and eastern Oregon forming an alliance and becoming a fortress in and of themselves against other people, other Americans. And there's been a great influx of white people to these states, especially to Idaho, which has always been known to be a center for white supremacy, outside Coeur d'Alene, the whole area. So the police department had two issues on their hand. They had this best party school in the state and all these conservatives, and it presented problems. So Brian gets involved from his school in Washington, just zip on down the highway to Pullman, from Pullman to Moscow to this party. And it was clear, people said, who were there when he was there, that he did not understand personal space. He approached two young women and asked them for their numbers. So why they gave them, I don't know. They probably wanted to get rid of him. But then they started getting hang-up calls later. At Pullman, he went on a charm offensive with the other PhD candidates. Nobody really liked him. Within a month of school starting, he was in trouble for his behavior as a teaching assistant. He was verbally abusive to students. He was denigrating. He spoke down to, was misogynistic to female students. He taunted, put downs, was arrogant, a bully, condescending, mocking, disdainful. Students complained he was an unfair grader. He made insulting comments on the paper. It's not helpful, you know. His supervising professor had a reputation as a very nice guy, very laid back, very, very kind, and experienced. And he knew he had a problem with this guy. So he started documenting right away. He did everything right. He bent over backwards to give him chances. He was very surprised, though, when he called Brian into his office, that Brian started arguing very aggressively with him and debating with him that what he was doing was not wrong, and, you know, giving this professor pushback. That's really inappropriate. September of 2022, he started a paper trail of his problems with Brian. So, you know, like a week into school, he wrote an official letter to the department head. He got everything documented. He sent a very detailed email, which we talked about before, to Brian about how he was failing as a TA and what he needed to do to improve. Then he was called into a meeting, and he was told that he had 1 month to straighten himself up. And they had a second meeting, and there were a lot of people included in this meeting that he wasn't expecting. He thought it was going to be him and the professor, but he had, you know, the dean and this guy and that guy. The second meeting, Brian still wasn't perfect, but he made some progress. And 2 days later, Brian lashed out at the professor again. This is verbal. There was nothing physical going on. Around the same time that he got aggressive again with the professor, several of the women in the program went to him and complained, went to the professor and complained that Brian was creepy and he made them uncomfortable, and that he was following students in his car. And there's another story. I hope I wrote it down somewhere, but I want to tell it in case I forgot to write it down. He trapped one student in her office. She was in the office, and he kind of blocked the doorway and wouldn't let her out. It was very uncomfortable. All of this was the last straw, and a letter was sent to him dismissing him as a TA December 19th of 2022. He had left. He had left with his father in the car to go back to Pennsylvania for the Christmas break. And there's a lot of commentary about other professors who were interviewed, and they said you have to be a real outlier with reprehensible behavior to lose a TA position, because you get accepted to a PhD program. This is coveted, and it's the first semester. So as a newbie, it's very important to present a good image, first impressions. And it said that they commit to you. It doesn't cost you anything. You work for them, but they've committed to your education and to your career. And to get into an adversarial relationship is really a bad choice. If you lose your TA position, then you have to pay, and you lose your mentorship. And without your mentorship, you don't get a PhD. So to keep a TA job, and I thought this was really funny, they were talking about, a lot of academics are a little eccentric, and a lot of students who are PhD students are a lot eccentric. And, psychology, probably a little more than usual. And to keep a TA job, all you have to do is show up, get decent grades, and treat people with respect. And he couldn't even do that. His sense of intellectual grandiosity caused him to fight with his professor. He'd have had to have been really oppositional, though, to get himself kicked out. It's really out of the ordinary, making professors and female students uncomfortable. Because in general, there are a lot of eccentric people in academics. However, Brian was arrogant. He believed the school couldn't fire him. In fact, on his drive home with his father, he was telling him about this hassle he was having, and he had no idea that he was on the verge of being fired, and that actually he left right before the letter got to his house. He believed that he'd get a hearing and an appeal, and he had a list of complaints, and he thought he'd be able to talk his way out of it about how the school was unfair to him. They thought I'm a hard grader. The students are plotting to get me into trouble because they're too lazy to do the work. And he claimed that the criminal justice department had a vendetta against him. So it's paranoid, And after this conversation in the car, right after it is when they got pulled over by the drug interdiction teams in Indiana. It's all on body cam. So while was his father driving home with him? His father flew to Washington to help Brian come home for the Christmas break. And the father took a trip of 2,500 miles in 4 days to make that happen. And now we're going to get a little bit more into Brian's situation. Before we do that, let me quickly talk about a professor of forensic psychology who evaluated the whole situation. She was, working with him. She said, growing up, he had a family history of crimes, felony car theft, gambling. He exhibited misogyny. He was bullied because he was fat. He was OCD. He became a heroin addict very young. He lost weight, got arrogant and awkward with girls. He was creepy. And then there's his choice of victims. He was obsessed with Ted Bundy, and so was his mother. She wrote an op-ed to the paper about the death penalty and how it's not fair that Ted Bundy would receive it. He wrote a paper about Ted Bundy in school, and he had all these pictures I mentioned before. He had some interesting pictures. He took selfies of himself on hikes to Ted Bundy's dumping grounds. His choice of victims was very similar to Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy attacked a sorority house full of girls, and Brian attacked a house full of girls. What was going on? Did he feel rejected? Was he trying to prove his intelligence to the college? I'm so smart I can get away with this. His arrogance, misogyny in school. He was always creepy with the women. So, okay, that's that. When he went away to his PhD program, it was the longest time that he'd ever been gone from his parents. His father expressed fear of what version of Brian he would be driving home with. That's odd. He called Brian a master of disguise. This is his own father. He had picked a direct route home, and Brian got very angry with him. He wanted to take a longer route, a circuitous route through Colorado, and it was snowing. And his father thought that was insane, but they did it anyway. So he was superior and controlling, and he told his father that he, Brian, was the boss, and he knew better. So his dad just did what he always did. He just went with the flow. While they were driving in the car, before they got pulled over, they got a phone alert on Brian's phone about a SWAT situation on the Washington State University campus. This has nothing to do with the previous murders. But Michael had a bad feeling. He remembered that a month before, these kids had been killed on the campus. And he wondered out loud, he wondered to his son out loud, there must be demons in the Northwest. Brian was seething in this drive about his unfair treatment at Pullman. So November 2nd, he gets called into that meeting with the faculty, and November 13th, murders are happening. November 21st is his birthday, and then soon after that, he returns home to Pennsylvania for the holidays. Let's see what else I have here. And so the question is, was this him proving how smart he was? Was this revenge fantasies for the bullying? Was this just outright misogyny? What was going on with him? So let's go back a little bit and look at some of his psychology. Now this is a little bit out of order. Let's read this. One psychologist asked, was this crime a revenge fantasy? Was he trying to prove to the Washington professors that he could commit the perfect crime? You can fire me, but look what I can do. But he didn't know yet that he was fired, and he was thinking that it was justified and he wouldn't be fired. So maybe this is not so true. Maybe he was just trying to prove, I understand criminality better than you, and I can commit the perfect crime and get away with it. Now, they wouldn't know if it were the perfect crime and he got away with it. They wouldn't know, but he would know. He had a growing anger and resentment. In April, he had been denied that police internship in Pullman that he applied for. He was resentful of women who were successful. Early in the semester, students that were smart, other PhD women who were successful, and his anger grew as students started complaining about him. He got angrier and angrier. He felt persecuted and paranoid about the PhD department going after him. So this is a big question, and I don't think there's an answer to this. I don't know if there ever will be. Did he reach out to one of the victims and get rejected? So psychologists speculating about the crime. Here's some of the things that they threw out there. This is not my opinion. This is psychologists who've analyzed it. Was he trying to even the score with the school, like prove how great he was as a criminologist student? So was he just having a bad week because it was his birthday week? Was it a way to cope with overwhelming shame, anger, and anxiety, inadequacy, and insecurity from a long history of his weird life? Or was violence a quick way to distract and feel special and to take control? We don't know. We don't know enough about him because he's not talking. So let's go back here a little bit. When he got skinny, he became aggressive and arrogant. He applied for a part-time security job at the Pleasant Valley School District in 2016. About his weight loss, he says, this is proof that I have the required dedication to be successful. The weight loss became a feather in his cap. It made him special. It proved his physical superiority. And, we talked about the Raskolnikov crime and punishment, the great man theory. He felt he had intellectual and physical superiority, that he could commit murders and get away with it. Very, narcissistic. People like this, according to this one particular psychiatrist online, looking at this said, people with this sort of mental situation, I don't know what the official term is, they cause real devastation when they can't connect with women, And he's assuming that women will be automatically attracted to him and they're repelled. So there's this weird account online called Papa Roger. And there's a little picture, a little cartoon that looks just like Brian Kohberger. It's creepy. And there's some discussion. Was this actually Brian Kohberger? Was he an incel from way back? An incel is involuntary celibate. It's guys that are so weird that women reject them and they blame the women. They don't ever look at themselves and think, well, maybe I could, take a charm school class or something. There's no proof that any of this is true. This is speculation about the Papa Roger thing and the incel thing. But there is that tendency towards male superiority, and he would have been drawn to that, like Raskolnikov was in the book. It favors men, the power. So did he feel, this is really interesting, did he feel that he was superior to women because of his mother? Now, they always like to blame the mother, but his dynamic with his parents was really, really odd. She was overly protective and supportive. She was kind and nurturing, but she fostered dependency. They didn't let him grow up. I mean, his father is taking him to school like he's going to kindergarten. He's 28 years old. But then the other women in his life are bullying him. He's getting these mixed messages from women. But he lived with his mother all the way through getting his master's, and she was his buffer. When he failed with women at school, he, at Pullman, things are going wrong, and he doesn't have the security of his mother around. It's not his mother drove him to it, but the absence of his mother might have been an issue. He didn't have her there in Washington. He got a big dose of reality. Slap in the face, he realizes just how inadequate he is. And he's confused. Why aren't women nice like mom? And he has unrealistic expectation that women should dote on him like mom. And his relationship with his mother is not reciprocal. It's one-dimensional. He takes, doesn't give. His mother babied him, and all of this is evident on social media. It's really incredible. She talks about, my son is leaving and I won't be on social media much because I'll be so busy crying for her son, who's 28. She gets his age wrong. She puts him at younger. She kind of is a Freudian minimizing of him. It's like a denial that he's as old as he really is, and a shame because her 27-year-old baby is leaving the nest, except he's 28. Later, she wrote, he's where he knows absolutely no one. This is when he's in the PhD program. He's where he knows absolutely no one. We have no family there, and I worry about him being lonely, and I'm not sure he can fend for himself. Once again, 28. It's clear she realizes he's odd, and she should be worried about him struggling. In August, 6 weeks later, she's still going on about missing him and being depressed. There's this codependency going on. I'm blue. I miss him terribly. But his choice of school shows the decision is mutual for his BA and his MA. He decided to stay home for his MA, is what that's saying. She comments on a TV character with the hidden goodness, and that's how she sees her son, she says. He's vulnerable. He's experienced rejection. He has a fear of being treated unfairly from past bullying. The character she praised is, in real life, universally disliked by viewers. It's a villain who hurts people. I guess this is the TV character. And the TV character lashes out at people, and it's very much like your son, actually. Violence is a way to compensate for a sense of inadequacy. It shows you're powerful and in control. You're not vulnerable. You're strong. His mother sees his vulnerable side, and the school sees his more aggressive, and dominant, and controlling side. These murderers were primitive. They were animalistic. They were extreme, and they created extreme fear, uncertainty, and insecurity in the population. He's like a monster in a nightmare. We don't understand. He shows up unexpectedly, does his damage, and disappears. It's like a real-life horror movie. And this psychiatrist also says these victims did everything right. And he talks about antisocial personality disorder, psychopathy. This is a psychiatrist's resident psychiatrist. On YouTube, his Dr. Van something, and I didn't write the rest of his name down, but he does a great job. He talks about crimes from a psychological point of view, and it's really interesting. He says, does he have a delusional, he tends to get very literary, which I love. He says, does he have a delusional disorder with erotomania, like an Othello syndrome? He said people who do that are like celebrity stalkers. Or is it a schizoaffective disorder? He's getting all technical on us now. Othello syndrome is a delusion with overlying erotomania, with jealous rage. He says most likely, this is just playing an intellectual game, this doctor. He says most likely we're just looking at psychopathology. Not diagnosing, quoting the doctor. So this Papa Roger Facebook thing was investigated by the FBI, and they said they didn't believe that it was him. People speculate that Papa Roger was named as an homage to Elliot Rodger, who killed the people at UCSB. He was an incel. Was also fascinated with Ted Bundy. So, digital forensic experts worked with the FBI, and they did a desperate search of the computers and these sites to find deleted information. And they said that he was very good at hiding and erasing information on his phone and his computer. From the teacher who worked with him at Pullman, they'd gotten 13 complaints from women. And this teacher warned the university. She said, mark my word, I work with predators. She's a forensic psychologist. I work with predators. I'll read the whole thing. Kohberger is smart enough that in 4 years, we will have to give him a PhD. Mark my word, I work with predators. If we give him a PhD, that's the guy who many years, when he's a professor, we will hear he's harassing, stalking, and abusing people. So they fired him. They took her advice. She warned her colleagues months before about how weird this guy was. She had specific concerns about his threatening behavior. Mentioned that he blocked the door on that one student. One female student said, I really need to get out of here. One female student who got blocked told him, I really need to get out of here. Somebody else heard that, realized what he was doing, and came to her rescue. People thought he was stalking them. He stole perfume and underwear from a female grad student. Multiple complaints about him, about his sexist and creepy behavior. This professor advocated cutting off his funding to remove him. He was obsessed with serial killers. He wrote papers on burglary, researched burglary. The week after the murder, he was seen with bandages on his fingers, and he said he had a serious, a silly accident. So I think I could go on. Let me see here. Here's some psychological information about him. He called his parents twice a day. As a 28-year-old PhD student living on the other side of the country, he called his parents twice a day. First thing in the morning, last thing at night. Dr. Eileen Ryan, a forensic psychiatrist for Ohio State University, interviewed the family. And she specializes in OCD and adult and child psychiatry. She did a family evaluation, and then she did individual evaluations with his mother and his two sisters. I think it's significant, only with females in the family. These are some of her notes. She said, you could see his misogyny growing up. It was there. He was obsessed with Bundy, and it wasn't because his mother was. His mother wrote that op-ed about the death penalty. He wrote a paper about Bundy. He took hikes alone where Bundy dumped bodies. He took selfies that he framed intentionally to cut off graffiti on a rock so that it spelled a slur against women. This would be at Mount Rainier. And what else do I have here? I have more. Did he pick this house because it was home to many girls, like the sorority the Bundy attacked? Was he one-upping Ted Bundy? Dr. Ryan believed that the crime started with fantasies months earlier. He had a target, and we can only speculate why these specific women, but he had animus against women in general. He had a plan. His plan was interrupted. There were more people there than he expected that night. The best laid plans, right? The plan got disorganized, fell apart after he discovered there were these extra people, and he took his rage out on the victims. His misogyny fed his fantasy, which helped him to create the plan. And somebody in his situation would get as much pleasure from making the plan, planning, almost as much as he would from the crime itself. This is Professor Amelie Pednault, the criminology professor, who said he should be fired. She was concerned about how he treated the family students, and she finally came out and identified herself. For a while there, she was trying to lie low. Let's talk a little bit about his parents, because that's a real problematic relationship. Now, this is... Okay, we talked about that. Okay, so Scott Baum, can't read my writing, it's not very clear, talks about his parents. He says, he wrote, Why We Love Serial Killers, the Curious Appeal of the World's Most Savage Murderers. And he talks about Brian Kohberger. He says, in his opinion, now this is allegedly, I'm not diagnosing anything, he says he's a classic sociopath. And he blames his parents. He says it's not like a psychopath who can't form emotional connections and empathy. Sociopaths can. They're just criminals, they just become criminals. They're made. They're not born. It's not unusual for them to have powerful emotional empathetic connections with one or two people in their lives, and at the same time, complete disdain and hatred for the rest of humanity. I guess you could say we see that here. Kohberger called his parents the morning of the murders, after he committed the murders. He called his mother less than 2 hours after the killing. The first call was at 6:13. He didn't get an answer. At 6:14, he called his dad. Then he texted his dad. His mother didn't answer. At 6:17, he called his mother and got an answer and talked for 36 minutes. At 8:03, again, he called his mother and talked for 54 minutes. He was en route to the scene of the crime at, the 9 o'clock appearance, probably to get the sheath. Why he didn't, I don't know. Oh, he searched the yard for the sheath on the phone with his mother. At 4:05 p.m., he talked to his mother again for 2 minutes. And at 5:53, he talked to his mother for 96 minutes. So he has that sociopathic connection to his parents. It's a pattern of reference to men and women that shows that he revered them and needed his parents and needed emotional support and connection from his mother and father. He called after the crime to get grounded, which is classic sociopathic behavior. Feel the fear and do it anyway. His knowledge is you can handle anything. It lets you take risks, this sociopathy. He's highly troubled. He has dysfunctional relationships, especially with women. He has a fear of women. He has a fear of academics and a fear of social relationships. He wanted support from his parents. All the selfies he was taking, that was flexing. That was his grandiosity. They were never sent to anybody. They were on his phone. So he was obsessed with serial killers like Harvey Gluckman, Robert Hansen in Alaska, the guy who hunted women, Tommy Lynn Sells, who was just a monster. He killed 22 people. Danny Rolling, the Gainesville Ripper, that crazy guy, kind of did the same MO as Danny Rolling. He used a sliding door, he used a K-bar, he was interrupted before he could do anything else to these women. But other than that, Kohberger copied Danny Rolling. He had a lot of porn on his phone, too. He was void of the phone, like there's nothing on the phone when the crime was committed. He physically turned off the Wi-Fi on the phone to avoid detection. He proved he cleaned up around the time before and after the crime. I won't say what he was doing, you know. He forgot to clear off downloads on his phone. So the time on his phone was bookended around the crime. Like the absence of activity was kind of diagnostic in itself. His alibi for why he was driving around that night, he was taking photos of the stars. But his phone was off and there were no pictures of the stars on his phone. This is premeditated. He called his parents every day, and it seems like he had no ties to the victims. After the crimes, he did a lot of searches about the crime. He also did searches about home invasions, burglaries, co-ed killings, serial killings, and as I said before, incapacitated victims. Danny Rolling's, it was like that too. On the Christmas break, he was searching. Oh, it happened. Oh. Sorry about that. The porn searches that he did were non-consensual, sleeping or unconscious women. He was into voyeurism, stalking. So there's some speculation. Two of the girls, Maddie and Kaylee, had worked at the Mad Greek, a restaurant in the heart of the university area there that served vegan food. He was a vegan. And they wondered, did he encounter one of them? And she rejected him. They found the directions to the Mad Greek restaurant on his Google Maps. He took a selfie in the bathroom after, and you could see his hand was bandaged, and he was like, thumb up. It was really awful. He also took a selfie that you could see online where he's in a dark hoodie, and it's very scary. It's menacing. The amount of searching that he did and the times of day that he did it, just not the sign of a healthy person. He bought the knife in March. He was clearing his phone in October. He had tons of time on Reddit about Moscow, and he got kicked off of Reddit for violent. When Moscow described the car they were looking for to the public, he went on a detailing site and looked for used cars. He was trying to get rid of his car. He was paranoid at the end. I think he feared that he'd get caught, probably. Okay, let's see what else I have to talk about here. We talked about the selfie of his face that he took in the bathroom and how menacing it was. Did he plead? He did plead. Did he plead because of his fear of the death penalty? Or because he didn't want his sister to testify about him, seeing him zip-blocking his garbage? So the psychiatrists, forensic psychiatrists, made a prediction. He is not talking now, but at some point in the future, he's going to send emails to set up a dialogue with his sister, and some of this stuff might come up. He's been in prison for 3 months, and he's complained obsessively about how unfair and awful the conditions are. He has no friends, and he's segregated. Story of his life. Now, that's my research on Brian Kohberger. Next you see me, I will be with Denise, and we will go over his astrological chart and his tarot cards. He's a piece of work, scary dude, and I hope this gives you some background to understand what happened. He's where he belongs. Thank you very much for watching this Longifoil Slunge.